let's talk about culture versus conviction. And I want to use two main scriptures for this. Zechariah 12 and Revelation chapter 18. We'll talk about more of it probably, but at least those two. So, let's start in Zechariah 12. It says in verse 2, "Behold, I am going to make Jerusalem a cup that causes reeling to all the peoples around. And when the siege is against Jerusalem, it will also be against Judah. It will come about in that day that I will make Jerusalem a heavy stone for all the peoples." So, everyone's going to come against Jerusalem. Israel. All nations are going to come against it. But let's read further on. Let's see starting verse 8. "In that day the Lord will defend the inhabitants of Jerusalem, and the one who is feeble among them in that day will be like David, and the house of David will be like God, like the angel of the Lord before them. And in that day I will set about to destroy all nations that come against Jerusalem," basically Israel. "I will pour out on the house of David and on the inhabitants of Jerusalem the spirit of grace and of supplication." That's an anointing. "So that they will look on me whom they have pierced, and they will mourn for him, as one mourns for an only son, and they will weep bitterly over him, like the bitter weeping over a firstborn. And in that day there will be a great mourning in Jerusalem, like the mourning of whatever this person's name, in the plain of Megiddo." And let's read in Zechariah 14 while we're here. Starting in verse 2. "For I will gather all nations against Jerusalem to battle, and the city will be captured, and the house plundered, the women ravaged, and half the city exiled. But the rest of the people will not be cut off from the city. Then the Lord will go forth and fight against those nations, as when he fights on a day of battle. In that day his feet will stand on the Mount of Olives, which is in front of Jerusalem on the east, and the Mount of Olives will be split in its middle from east to west by a very large valley." So we see those things, and then we go to Revelation. Oh, by the way, the horse is prepared for the day of battle. This is in Proverbs, I believe, if I remember correctly. "The horse is prepared for the day of battle, but victory is with the Lord." That's one thing we have to remember. He will fight the battles. We have to wait upon him. Just like it says, he will heal our land. We can't heal our own land. 2 Chronicles 7:14 that people love to quote, "He will heal our land." There's nothing we can do to heal our land. Definitely in the United States, we're not going to heal it. It's far gone. The immorality is so far out that I don't see any help. And the social programs have replaced God, which is a big part of this whole thing. So let's go to Revelation here. And, you know, you can read, I would highly suggest you read all of it. For the sake of time, I can't. You know, you read in Revelation 13 about the mark of the beast and people dying because they won't worship the mark of the beast. And where's the mark? Here or here? The right hand for a reason. It would be the right hand, which would be this side, but you know, the works and the mind. You know, God puts His seal on your forehead, the frontal lobe, and how you obey. And He marks His people before all the not the tribulation. We all go through the tribulation, but He marks the people that are His, that before the wrath, His wrath comes through. You can read that in Ezekiel, I believe it is. I've covered it before. Like we read in Revelation 14, it says 144,000 having his name, which a name is a character, and name of his Father written on their foreheads. If we are living Torah, that's what happens. It is written upon our frontal lobe. That's what controls us, not the emotional center. And this is all about coming out of Babylon. This culture we live in is a Babylon. And it says in Revelation 18, it says, come out of her. I heard another voice from heaven saying, come out of her, my people, so that you will not participate in her sins and receive of her plagues. Talking about Babylon. And all nations have committed fornication with her. And it, you know, you can read in Matthew 24 where it talks about the love of many will grow cold because of lawlessness, Torahlessness. And that's what we're facing. Do we really want to be part of the system that a system that murders babies, that publicly funds human sacrifice, or a Federal Reserve system that is a complete violation of Torah with the usury and unjust weights and measures? That's what the fractional reserve banking is all about. It's improper weights and measures that they change anytime they want, and it hurts all of us out here in the real world. And a culture that says, oh, well, you shouldn't wear a head covering, you shouldn't have a beard, you shouldn't do X, Y. You know, a traditional Christianity that's saying, oh, the law was done away with. But Matthew 24 says that the love of many will grow cold because of lack of Torah. Because lawlessness, Torahlessness. You can read about the 10 virgins, and I've covered that before. About the 5 foolish, he says, I did not know you. Depart from me, you who practice iniquity. Matthew 13, where it talks about the wheat and the tares. The wheat is gathered in, the tares are burned. And, you know, Yahweh is a consuming fire. But it says that the stumbling blocks are gathered and taken out. Then the righteous shine forth like the sun. And we read here in you can read in Revelation about the sea of glass. There are those standing on the sea of glass. While a nuclear weapon creates a sea of glass. Look at, if you look at the Trinity site, it's green glass. It's absolutely, it's green glass because the nuclear bomb turned the sand to glass. And, it says, come out of her, my people, that you do not receive of her plagues. That's what the bowls of wrath, why you need to read about the bowls of wrath. The loathsome sores. The sea turned to blood. The water turned to blood. The men are scorched. This is all in Revelation 16 about the bowls of wrath. The darkness and pain. Darkness and pain is something that you saw in Egypt. It was one of the plagues. Sores, boils, that was something that existed back then in Egypt. All the sea turned to blood. That was an Egypt plague. Water turned to blood. That was an Egypt plague. All of this stuff. The sixth bowl is the Euphrates dried up. The seventh bowl, earth utterly shaken. These things exist. And I was just reading the titles. I didn't read any of the scriptures on that. You can read the whole chapter for yourself. But do we really want to receive of these plagues? Or are we willing to stand up for what we believe? The harvest is the end of the age. The harvest is coming. The harvest has to do with their mind. Are we going to go along with culture, or are we going to have conviction? And that's the real question. Culture or conviction? We can see what the culture is doing, and the sinfulness and the lawlessness and the Torahlessness. Do we really want to be in that, or do we want to be set apart? That Torah was to set apart Israel. And it says all enemies will come against Israel. We're the only ones both the grafted in and the regrafted are the only things standing in Satan's way of completely ruling this world. Do we want to be on the opposite side? I don't think so. We need to have conviction. That the whole thing of beards, tzitzits, maybe wearing this, or tunic, those are tools for a lifestyle. That's the thing, is when are you willing to stand out? At what point do you draw the line? What point do you draw the line of how much you're going to participate in a culture that is totally against the Bible, against the Word of God, against Torah? How long? As for me and my house, we will serve the Lord, as it says with Joshua. As for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. That's in Joshua. It's plain and simple. The choice is yours. Live by this book, or you live by or you end up with the wrath that is in this book. The choice is yours. That's why conviction is so critical. There are consequences. You can read about them. Pick up, go read the prophets, go read Revelation, go read any of this stuff. You will see there is a cost. Shalom, shalom.